On Christmas Eve, the city seemed to wear a new, radiant, and sparkling coat, with Christmas lights resembling stars drawn across the night sky, illuminating every street. Each house was decorated with colorful lights, creating a warm atmosphere, but still unable to dispel the emptiness that many people could feel on this night. The cold of winter, the snow silently falling on rooftops, but within that peaceful space, there was a different feeling, a tension that seeped into every path, every corner of the heart. Naomi Carter stood silently in the midst of the Christmas party held at the luxurious restaurant, where the sparkling lights reflected off her simple yet elegant black dress. She wasn't the most outstanding person in the crowd, but the light from the chandelier above highlighted her graceful and unusual beauty. Naomi was an intelligent and talented woman, and although she was just a low-ranking employee at a large company, she always knew how to maintain an air of coldness and resilience. But tonight, she could clearly feel that everything was changing. Though she still tried to maintain her composure, a different feeling, an inexplicable instability was slowly taking over her heart. The party continued around her with the joyful laughter and chatter of the people, but Naomi couldn't bring herself to join in. Everything seemed to blur, and a small part of her began to feel anxious. Being invited to the company's party wasn't too surprising, but when CEO Brad Pitt, the powerful, mysterious, and incredibly attractive man, personally invited her, everything changed. Naomi had never imagined she would be invited so closely, nor that she would one day stand face to face with him in this space, a luxurious space that also made her feel suffocated. Brad Pitt. That name always made every woman swoon. But to Naomi, he was a completely different person. He was someone she always had to keep a distance from, someone with whom every relationship had to be controlled by logic. Brad was always cold, mysterious, with deep eyes and an enigmatic smile. A man who was calm and seductive to the point that everything seemed to revolve around him. Naomi had imagined much about this man, but she had never allowed personal feelings to arise. However, when he invited her to this party, everything changed. Brad's invitation was like an electric shock running through Naomi, making her unable to ignore the rising tension in her heart. Everything started to feel strange, as if something was wrong. But Naomi couldn't deny that in this strangeness, there was something incredibly captivating. Brad Pitt wasn't just a wealthy, powerful CEO. He was also the man Naomi couldn't stop thinking about. His words were always laced with charm, but Naomi always knew that this attraction could lead to unpredictable dangers. Naomi kept her emotions hidden, trying to control everything. She couldn't let a simple invitation from a powerful man disturb her logic. However, her heart kept reminding her. An unfamiliar feeling lingered with every heartbeat. When she entered the room, her eyes accidentally met Brad's gaze. He stood there, with the faint light from the chandelier shining on his face, making him look like a strange image, both mysterious and captivating. Though he maintained a cold demeanor, Naomi could feel an electric charge between them, something very different from what she had imagined. This feeling wasn't the one from extravagant parties, nor was it the one from polite invitations. It was an attraction full of contradictions, something that made Naomi both confused and unable to break free. Her logic still tried to keep her grounded, but when standing near Brad, a different sensation flooded her, filling every corner of her mind. How could a man so easily disturb the heart of a woman who was used to keeping her distance? Everything seemed to be changing. Naomi tried to control herself, maintaining her cold demeanor. She knew this was a great opportunity, but deep down, there was a conflict she couldn't describe in words. This feeling, it was strange like a fleeting breeze, but it stayed heavy in her heart. And Naomi understood that in this atmosphere, on this magical Christmas night, nothing would ever be the same again. Brad still stood there, his gaze never leaving Naomi, as if he was trying to uncover something profound within her. He knew Naomi wasn't the type of woman to be easily swept into his games. But there was something he couldn't deny. Naomi's allure, her her mystery, made him unable to stop paying attention to her. He had seen all the caution in her eyes, but he also noticed something different, a sensitivity he had never seen in anyone else. Naomi kept her emotions hidden, but her heart was racing. Was this the moment she would let her emotions speak, or continue to keep her distance from such a powerful man as Brad? In Brad's eyes, Naomi saw curiosity, exploration, but there was also something deeper, a desire she couldn't explain. She didn't want to let herself be caught up in any relationship that might affect her career, but she couldn't deny that tonight, everything seemed to be beginning to change. Naomi looked into Brad's eyes, feeling both strength and confusion within her own heart. She couldn't easily let her emotions break the boundaries she had set for herself. But something in this air, on this magical Christmas night, made it impossible for her to control herself. Could she continue to hold on to her logic in the face of such a lure, or would tonight be the moment she let her heart lead the way? Since that Christmas night, Naomi could not escape the image of Brad Pitt. Despite trying to suppress her emotions and maintain a distance, Brad's allure continuously drew her thoughts. Each day, as she entered the company, Naomi couldn't help but think of him. The moments of crossing paths at the party, or even just him passing by her, felt like a powerful wave, pushing all her thoughts into an uncontrollable world. Though her heart constantly reminded her that this was not a situation that could last, the stirring within her could not be easily extinguished. Naomi always understood the most about her work and career. She had worked hard to establish her position in a large company, a harsh environment where every decision, every gesture, every relationship could impact her reputation and future. For a woman like Naomi, professionalism was everything. Personal feelings were never allowed to override logic, and she knew well that her relationship with Brad, someone she only knew through work and social events, could not go beyond those boundaries. This relationship would only exist within the framework of work, as simple as that. She could not allow herself to lose everything just because of the unfamiliar emotions that Brad brought. Still, Naomi could not deny that every time she saw Brad, her heart would beat faster. Each time he stood near her, a slight electric charge would pass through her, making the boundaries she had set become fragile. Naomi tried not to think about him, but images of him, those meaningful glances at the Christmas party, kept repeating in her mind. She couldn't control that attraction, the natural charm he carried without even trying. Just one intense look from him was enough to make Naomi feel as if the world revolved around her. This made her feel like she was standing on the edge of change, unable to turn back. She struggled daily between maintaining professionalism at work and allowing personal emotions to take control. Every morning when she woke up, Naomi would remind herself that her career was the top priority, that her relationship with Brad was only a small part of the bigger picture she was building. She could not allow herself to be pulled into an uncertain and dangerous situation, because if she did, she would lose everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Yet, every time she faced him, Naomi felt an inexplicable disturbance. Her heart began to stir, and the principles she had set long ago seemed to be gradually wavering. This feeling was strange, as if she was sinking into a dream from which she couldn't wake. Naomi realized that her feelings for Brad could cause major problems, especially in the workplace, full of rules and judgments. She was a strong woman who always knew what to do to maintain her career, but love was something she couldn't control. This emotion made her feel weak, as if part of her was struggling with herself. She couldn't let it affect her work, but at the same time, her heart kept yearning for something deeper with Brad. Could there be something between them, something beyond the boundaries of work that she had set for herself? Each time Naomi saw Brad in meetings or during brief conversations, she couldn't help but feel a strange connection, a powerful presence he brought into the surrounding space. He wasn't just a powerful man. He was a symbol of freedom and decisiveness, things Naomi had always admired but also feared. She didn't know what to do when each day she had to face him, when every day she felt the disturbance in her heart growing stronger. Her feelings for Brad weren't something she could explain rationally. And the more time passed, the more Naomi realized that this could lead to unimaginable risks. Inside Naomi, there was a great conflict. She knew that this feeling couldn't simply be a passing infatuation, but she couldn't deny that the moments when she was near Brad, when listening to his words, she felt like she had found a part of life that had been missing for so long. But what did that mean? Could there be a balance between logic and emotion? Could she continue to maintain professionalism without letting her heart get lost in these intense feelings? Every night, when she returned to her apartment, Naomi would lie awake, images of Brad running through her mind. She couldn't escape them. Every gesture of his, every vague smile in their brief conversations, all sparked a desire that had never appeared in her life. Naomi understood that this wasn't a normal situation, but she couldn't stop feeling her heart race every time she thought about Brad. These emotions, though strong, made her feel uneasy. She didn't know how to make a decisive choice with herself, didn't know if she had enough strength to abandon these emotions and hold her ground. Naomi's feelings for Brad were something she couldn't control, nor could she explain. As each day passed, the struggle between logic and emotion grew fiercer. Naomi knew she was standing at an important decision, but her heart was gradually wanting to break all the boundaries she had built over the years. She couldn't stop thinking about him, couldn't stop feeling the attraction Brad brought. But would she dare to cross that line, to follow her heart, and face the consequences that could unfold? That question continued to linger in her mind, and Naomi knew that the truth could only be found when she decided to confront her feelings. The company's Christmas party took place in a space sparkling with warm golden lights, where stars decorating the giant Christmas tree reflected dreamily, creating a mysterious and seductive atmosphere. Everyone was happy, exchanging and talking, but Naomi felt like she was lost in the party itself. Even though this was a festive occasion, a chance for everyone to relax and enjoy, Naomi couldn't escape the thoughts swirling in her mind. She could feel the tension in every gesture, every step she took, as though the eyes around her were scrutinizing every action she made. Also here, in this luxurious party, Brad Pitt was the center of attention, his presence making the space feel even more suffocating and magnetic. He stood there, the man Naomi had always tried to keep her distance from. But today, his presence was no longer something she could stay calm about. Brad, with his cold and strong demeanor, had always been the one to attract every gaze. But for Naomi, today everything was different. She couldn't stop thinking about the vague encounter they had shared on the previous Christmas night. Everything now was no longer just simple moments of work, but an enigmatic conversation she couldn't fully understand. Every time Naomi looked toward Brad, she felt a light wave pass through her, as if the connection between them was not just limited to ordinary glances. Those glances were not simply polite exchanges, but sparks that were slowly igniting. A feeling Naomi couldn't explain. She tried to ignore it, not letting herself be swept into his charm, but her heart couldn't stop racing every time she saw him. Brad stood there, like an unshakable monument in the crowd, and she felt like a small flame, easily swept away by a storm of emotions. The evening continued in ambiguity, as Naomi and Brad had brief but loaded conversations. She could clearly feel that the romance didn't just stem from the atmosphere around them, but from the things Brad unintentionally revealed in his words. In these exchanges, Brad began talking about his expectations in work and life, unintentionally making Naomi feel the rising sense of unease. He didn't just talk about work. He also exposed deep thoughts about his personal life, things that Naomi couldn't help but feel herself being drawn into. He spoke about things he wanted to achieve, people he wanted to meet, and often mentioned the expectations he placed on those around him, especially the people in the company. Naomi couldn't help but feel pulled into his words. Every time he spoke, she felt like she was being drawn into another world, where work and personal emotions strangely intertwined. He spoke about leadership, about strength in work, but those words seemed to carry a deeper meaning, an implication of something Naomi couldn't predict. She wasn't sure what his true intentions were, whether he simply wanted to talk or had a deeper hidden agenda. Brad's words made Naomi feel confused and lost, unsure whether he was trying to approach her in a personal relationship or simply exploring the professional connection between them. The ambiguous feeling grew stronger as Brad started offering subtle hints. Questions about Naomi's personal life, about her goals for the future, seemed to be more than just casual questions. Perhaps Naomi was the only one who felt the difference in these inquiries. Every time she responded, she felt like she was gradually losing control of her emotions. Though she tried to keep the conversation within the professional scope, Brad's gaze couldn't hide the special interest, an interest she couldn't predict. Every time he looked into her eyes, Naomi felt a strange tension, as if there was a question in his eyes that had yet to be answered, and she was the answer. The situation became more complicated when Naomi began to feel that she was losing control over her emotions. Brad's gestures, whether accidental or intentional, made her feel as though she was being pulled into a current from which she couldn't escape. She wanted to keep everything professional, but each of his looks made her forget her logic. Every word he spoke only added to her confusion, as if he were opening doors that Naomi couldn't stop walking through. Doors she couldn't cross without feeling she had gone too far. That evening, Naomi couldn't help but feel the tension between the two of them growing stronger. Her relationship with Brad was no longer a normal boss-employee dynamic. It was a crossing between work and emotion, between logic and heart. She knew that the boundaries between work and feelings would easily blur, but she couldn't stop feeling that she was walking on an ambiguous path, a path she couldn't turn back from. She felt like she was standing between two choices: to continue maintaining professionalism or to step beyond the boundaries she had set for herself. And when the party ended, Naomi couldn't forget Brad's last look, a gaze full of implication, as if he were waiting for an answer she wasn't ready to give. Everything now was no longer just work, no longer just the rules and principles that had existed in the company. The relationship between Naomi and Brad had become much more complicated, and Naomi couldn't help but feel that she was standing on the edge of a cliff, where every step could lead her to a decision that would change everything. She didn't know whether she could maintain her resolve, or whether her heart would lead her down a path she couldn't return from. But one thing was certain: the relationship between her and Brad was no longer simple or easy to understand. After the Christmas party came to an end, in a cheerful and warm atmosphere, everyone gradually left, and the lights from the Christmas decorations faded, giving way to the stillness of the late night. Naomi stood in the large room, the yellow light still shining down, creating a peaceful, romantic space. She felt as if she had fallen into a trap she had created herself. Brad's allure continued to haunt her, even though she had tried so hard to maintain distance. They stood facing each other, with only a few people left in the room, and while the joyful sounds of the party still seemed to echo somewhere for Naomi and Brad, the space at that moment was immersed in a silence full of tension. Thoughts swirled in Naomi's mind, unable to escape the image of Brad. She had tried to keep herself within the framework of work, not letting herself be swept into those emotions. But Brad's presence kept changing everything. They stood there, with only a few people still in the room, and the atmosphere now became still, strange, and somewhat mystical. The soft melody of a Christmas song played in the background, the sound of the piano gently humming, making the space even more romantic, as if trying to comfort each person's soul. At that moment, Brad suddenly turned to Naomi, his gaze softening, something strange in his eyes. He smiled, but it was not the usual smile, not the smile of a boss to an employee. This was the smile of a man seeking something deeper in this relationship. Naomi couldn't help but notice the change in his eyes, an eye no longer cold as people usually saw. It was the look of a man lost in his own thoughts, with a bit of confusion, a bit of curiosity, but also an unspoken desire. Brad began to speak, his voice lowering, as if he wanted to share something more personal. "Naomi, I've been observing you for a long time," he said, his eyes not leaving her face. "You're a very special person, Every time I look at you, I feel something I can't explain." His words hit Naomi like an electric shock. She stood still, unable to say anything, only looking into his eyes, feeling the sincerity in each word he spoke. But was this the truth? Did Brad really feel this way? Naomi couldn't help but wonder. Was he just saying these things because of the romantic, inspired atmosphere of Christmas night? Or did he truly have feelings for her? Naomi felt her heart pounding, as if all the emotions she had suppressed over time suddenly erupted. She could no longer hide her feelings, and the words quietly slipped from her lips, like an underground river breaking free. I've loved you for a long time," Naomi said, her voice trembling, a little shy but also full of truth. This confession was like a huge wave sweeping away all the thoughts in her mind. It was something Naomi had always tried to hide, an emotion she had tried to keep in check for so long. She hadn't wanted it to affect her work, their relationship, but now it had escaped her like an unstoppable force. When Naomi confessed those words, the space around them seemed to become heavier, and silence enveloped both of them. Brad stood there, still looking at Naomi, but his gaze was no longer gentle. It was filled with thought. He didn't immediately respond, but remained silent, as if trying to figure out how to explain his own feelings. Or perhaps he was thinking about what she had just said. Naomi couldn't read Brad's expression. She felt as if she had just opened a door that she couldn't close again. Everything now couldn't be the same, and she didn't know if her confession would change anything in their relationship. Brad finally spoke, but his voice carried a blend of calmness and ambiguity. "Naomi." He paused for a moment, as if searching for words to express what was weighing on his heart. "You're a very special person. I can't deny that. But could it be that you're talking about a real emotion, or just a passing infatuation?" Brad's words hit Naomi like a bucket of cold water. Did he really love her? Or was it just a playful thing in the romantic atmosphere of Christmas night? Naomi couldn't answer that question. She just stood there, looking into Brad's eyes, feeling all her emotions suddenly become unclear, as if what she had just said no longer mattered. Brad looked at her, his gaze never leaving Naomi's face. There was sincerity in his words, but also a deep skepticism. Was she the one he was seeking, or just a part of the romantic atmosphere of tonight? Could this feeling exist in the world they were living in? Or was it just something sweet, too fragile to become real? Naomi couldn't know, couldn't predict. She could only stand there, waiting for an explanation from Brad. But inside, she was filled with doubt and confusion. The party had ended long ago, but now, facing Brad, Naomi felt as though she were standing between two worlds. One full of hope, full of dreams of true love, and the other where doubt, hesitation, and uncertainty prevailed. She didn't know if she had the strength to face these emotions, to accept the truth that Brad brought, or not. The questions about feelings and this relationship kept swirling in her mind. But one thing she knew for sure: everything was no longer as simple as before. As the conversation between Naomi and Brad continued to sink into an intense silence, the atmosphere around them seemed to grow heavier than ever. Naomi's confession still echoed in her mind, making her heart tighten. She couldn't understand why Brad could remain silent for so long. It felt as if all the thoughts in her head were swirling, unable to find a direction, unable to explain why everything had become so complicated. She had expressed her feelings, something she had suppressed for so long, but now her heart was weighed down with confusion and uncertainty. Naomi looked into Brad's eyes, hoping he would say something to ease her mind, an explanation, some kind of comfort. But no, his silence only made things worse. She had thought that when she confessed, when she shared the emotions she had kept hidden for so long, he would understand and respond. But instead of empathy, there was cold silence, making her feel like a weak person, unable to control her own emotions. "Naomi," Brad finally spoke, his voice no longer warm, but instead cold and somewhat unclear. "I know everything you feel. I've realized for a while that you have feelings for me, but I never thought it would go beyond this relationship." Those words hit Naomi like a knife to the heart, causing her to feel choked, unable to breathe. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Brad had known everything, but he hadn't said a word, hadn't reacted when she had tried to keep her emotions in check. He had known, but hadn't opened his heart to her. Naomi tried to find an explanation from him. She couldn't understand why Brad had been so silent. If he had known about her feelings for so long, why hadn't he offered any words of encouragement? Any comfort? She had been careful, had kept things professional, but now she felt like she was falling into an extremely ambiguous and unclear world. You've known for a long time?" Naomi asked, her voice trembling, unable to hide the hurt. "Then why didn't you say anything? Why let me stand here, in this situation, when I don't know what to do anymore?" Brad was silent for a long time, as if searching for a way to answer that he felt was reasonable. Finally, he responded, but his voice still hadn't changed. It remained distant and ambiguous. "I've seen you, Naomi. I've seen the way you look at me, the way you treat me, but I'm not sure if we can go beyond this relationship." Those words were like a heavy blow to Naomi's heart. She felt choked up, her tears beginning to blur her vision, but she fought to hold them back, not allowing them to fall. Everything seemed to crumble inside her. Brad had known about her feelings for a long time, but he didn't want to take things further. Did he see her only as part of work, a colleague, and not someone he could share feelings with as she had hoped? Naomi couldn't understand this. She had spent so much time holding back. How many times had she wanted to say these words but lacked the courage? Yet now, when she had mustered the strength to confess, she was only met with silence and vague words from Brad. She felt like a blind person who had paved a path and now had to face the truth that this path led nowhere. She didn't know what to do, how to face the man she had loved all this time, but could not love. The tension between the two of them continued to rise. Naomi felt like she was standing at the edge of an abyss, unable to turn back, unable to move forward. She had confessed, had opened up, but the result was embarrassment and pain. Brad said nothing more, just stood there, his eyes still on her, but there was no change in them. Naomi didn't know what she was feeling anymore. Disappointment, confusion, or just the numbness of a heart that had been in so much pain. This feeling was like a sharp blade cutting into Naomi's heart. Everything she had imagined would turn out differently now seemed vague, as if it had all been a game. She didn't know if she could continue this relationship as before, continue working with Brad, when her heart was still tangled with these unresolved emotions. Could she maintain a professional relationship when her heart was still in turmoil with feelings that hadn't been addressed? She didn't know. She didn't know if she had the strength to overlook these feelings, to keep her professionalism, or if those emotions would lead her, pulling her into a relationship she couldn't control. Naomi looked at Brad, but now she no longer felt the familiarity, the warmth she once sensed. She felt a vast distance between them, a distance she couldn't cross. Brad still stood there, like a man who didn't know what she had been through, what she had hoped for. She felt lost, not knowing what to do next. Her feelings now were like a storm, tearing apart everything she had tried to build. But could this relationship continue when her heart couldn't let go? The night continued in silence, the dim lights casting shadows on the glossy wooden floor, creating a space that was both warm and filled with unease. Naomi stood there, in her own ambiguity, not knowing what to do next. Her heart seemed to have fallen into an abyss, where every emotion, every hope had fallen down, unable to find a way out. After Brad revealed that he had known her feelings for a long time, yet hadn't responded the way she had hoped, Naomi felt a quiet pain rise within her. She no longer knew if she could continue this professional relationship with Brad when her emotions had already been exposed so clearly. Before her heart could settle, a sudden moment occurred that changed everything inside Naomi. While she was still grappling with questions about her feelings, about their relationship, Brad suddenly turned to her, his gaze becoming deep and full of resolve. He no longer wore the cold or distant attitude. Instead, there was sincerity in his every word. "Naomi, I have feelings for you too," Brad said, his voice no longer harsh as it usually was. For the first time, Naomi sensed softness in his confession. "But I'm afraid that if we start a relationship, it will affect our work and possibly damage the relationships in the company." These words struck Naomi like a shock, causing her to freeze, unable to move. She never imagined hearing this from Brad. All her worries, the long nights of thinking, the inner struggles suddenly came crashing down. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Brad had feelings for her too? Could he be sincere? Or was he just using these words to hide his own doubts and fears? In Naomi's eyes, Brad was not someone who easily revealed his emotions, and this only made everything seem more ambiguous than ever. She stood there, her heart racing, her mind swirling with thoughts she couldn't explain. Was Brad's confession really the truth, or just words spoken in a moment of vulnerability? Naomi looked into Brad's eyes, while the questions about his feelings kept swirling in her mind. She didn't know if this was the moment to trust him. She had kept her feelings hidden for so long, and now that Brad had opened up, she didn't know if he truly loved her, or if it was just a fleeting desire for a relationship in the moment. This feeling was too complicated, too difficult to explain. In that moment, Naomi felt as if everything had been turned upside down, as if she couldn't tell what was real, what was fake, what was the truth, and what was just a playful gesture in a night full of emotions. "This isn't what you think," Brad continued, as if understanding the worry clearly showing in Naomi's eyes. "I don't want to ruin our work relationship, and I don't want to make things more complicated. But I can't deny that I do have feelings for you." Brad's words were just enough for Naomi to sense sincerity, but they also left her in utter confusion. Was he sharing his feelings honestly, or was he just giving excuses to cover up his hesitation, his fears? Naomi couldn't answer in that moment. She just stood there, silently, her heart crashing like waves against the shore. It felt like a heavy stone was pressing down on her chest. Everything around Naomi now seemed unclear. Brad said he had feelings for her, but he was afraid that if they started a relationship, it would affect their work and the relationships within the company. This made Naomi feel a deep sense of emptiness. Did he truly love her? Or was it just an attraction in the moment? When the romance of Christmas night made everything seem ambiguous and temporary, Naomi felt a huge contradiction inside her. She had confessed her feelings, but now Brad said this relationship could affect their work, their relationships within the company. His words forced Naomi to face a big question. Should she continue this relationship despite the risks? Or should she step back and keep her work and professional relationships intact? She didn't know how to decide. Everything suddenly seemed too complicated, too difficult to choose. She realized that her feelings for Brad were no longer just a secret relationship. It was no longer private stories, sneaky glances, or brief moments in the office. Everything was now exposed before them, and the truth made things even more difficult. Naomi couldn't help but wonder where this relationship could go, whether Brad truly loved her, or if it was just a temporary connection in the moment. Their relationship was no longer a game, but it wasn't a simple relationship either. Rather, it was a big question Naomi couldn't answer in that moment. Could she continue to love Brad in this risky relationship? Or would she step back, maintain her professionalism, and do what was right for herself? Everything was unclear, and in that moment, Naomi realized that love, sometimes, is not an easy decision, especially when it's tied to work and the complex relationships that come with it. On Christmas Eve, the surroundings seemed to quiet down, with only the twinkling lights from the Christmas tree and the soft hum of carols filling the air. blending with the peaceful atmosphere of the city. But inside Naomi, the silence became heavy, like a storm settling, unable to be dispelled. She stood there, in a room full of warm light, but inside her heart was a whirlwind of unresolved emotions. Every word Brad spoke, every glance he gave her, made her heart race, as if everything had led to this moment, a moment in which she had to make an important decision, a decision that would change her life forever. Naomi had loved Brad for a long time, but what she couldn't have anticipated was how this love would intertwine with difficult choices and challenges. This love wasn't simple. It wasn't just a sweet feeling in private moments, but also decisions that had to face risks with her career and the complicated relationships at the company. She had spent so much time thinking about whether she could go further with Brad, but now, standing before him, feeling the truth of his emotions toward her, she no longer knew which path to take. Brad looked at Naomi, his gaze filled with deep thought, as though he was considering all the possibilities, all the changes that would happen in both their lives if they decided to continue. "Naomi," he said, his voice both gentle and firm, "you don't have to rush into a decision right now. I understand this is a big decision, not an easy one, but I will let you choose your path freely. I don't want to pressure you into doing something you're not ready for." His words, though gentle, were heavy, like a promise, an acknowledgement that both of them were standing at a crossroads, where just one more step could change everything. Naomi felt as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff. She could continue the cold, firm, professional relationship she had maintained before, or she could open her heart, take a risk with the love she had longed for. But was that love worth sacrificing everything she had built? Could she give up her career and professional relationships to enter a relationship full of uncertainty and risk? These questions swirled in her mind, leaving her tired and confused. A suffocating feeling rose in Naomi's chest. She looked into Brad's eyes, and for the first time in her life, she was unsure of what she would do. She had imagined this day, imagined standing before Brad and confessing her feelings. But now, with those feelings reciprocated, it was something completely different. Brad didn't ask anything of her, didn't force her to make a quick decision. He gave her freedom, freedom to choose. But that freedom became a burden to Naomi, because she knew that every decision she made would carry unforeseen consequences. Brad stepped closer, but not to rush Naomi. Instead, to stand beside her, like a friend, like a man who wanted to share every challenge with her. "I'm ready to face the challenges with you," he said, his hand gently resting on Naomi's shoulder, a silent gesture that was full of comfort. "No matter what path you choose, I'll always be here, never leaving you. But you need to decide. You need to know clearly what you want in your heart." That feeling, the sincerity in Brad's words, was like a faint light in the dark, making Naomi's heart light up. She didn't need to seek answers from anyone else, didn't need to rely on what others thought of her or the relationship. She needed to listen to her heart, decide based on what she felt and believed. But this decision wasn't simple. It touched everything Naomi had built. If she chose love, she would face uncertainty, challenges that could destroy everything she had. Naomi stood there, feeling the warmth of Brad's hand on her shoulder, a warmth she had never felt before. She looked into his eyes, which held not only care, but also a promise that he would always be beside her, no matter what happened. Emotions surged in her heart, emotions she had hidden for so long. She wanted to love. She wanted to enter a relationship with Brad, but she also feared that this love would change everything, that it would destroy what she had. She looked at the light from the Christmas tree, her eyes beginning to blur from the tears she couldn't hold back. A part of her wanted to give up everything to love Brad, to enter a relationship she knew wouldn't be easy. But another part of her was afraid that when everything changed, she would lose everything she had worked so hard for. She couldn't resolve this conflict, couldn't choose between love and career. The situation was truly suffocating. Both of them stood facing each other in a quiet space, with only the soft Christmas music floating in from afar. Naomi felt her heart racing, the chaotic thoughts and feelings swirling nonstop. She couldn't make a decision in that moment, couldn't let her heart overpower her logic. But one thing was certain: whatever path she chose, that path would never lead her back. Naomi took a deep breath, wiped away the tears that hadn't yet fallen, and looked at Brad, her eyes filled with determination. She was no longer afraid. She would let love guide her, even though the road ahead would be tough, even though she would face unpredictable challenges. Naomi had chosen her path, a path she knew would not be easy, but at least it was the path she wanted to walk, the path she wanted to share with Brad. And when her heart finally made the decision, she understood that no matter what happened, love would always be the most important thing, and that love would be the one thing that would never change. Naomi stood in the office, the soft light from the desk lamps gliding over the polished wooden desk. But everything around her seemed unclear. A great wave stirred inside her, and although the view outside the window remained beautiful with the gentle snowfall, she felt a deep emptiness, as if the entire world consisted only of unanswered questions. Today, as she faced her decision, emotions overtook her, intertwined and confused, like the cold winter winds. Yet, Naomi knew she couldn't let emotions rule everything. Because in every breath, she understood that the sacrifice required wasn't always about giving up love, but knowing how to choose what was most important in her life. Love, as she had known, can come unexpectedly and in situations you never anticipate. She had loved Brad for a long time, but now, when that love was reciprocated, when she no longer had to hide it, she was confronted with a larger question. Could love change everything? And if it did, could she maintain her career, remain true to herself amidst the temptations of emotion? The answer Naomi sought was not easy. She couldn't let love become a danger to what she had built. Years of hard work, endless efforts, and all the relationships she had carefully maintained at the company. She understood that love could not and should not be the reason to overlook what had shaped her. Though her heart longed to be with Brad, a part of her remained firm in the decision she had made before. She couldn't allow herself to be swept up in emotion, because if she did, she would lose everything she had struggled to achieve. She had spent her life building a solid career, a career that no one could easily alter. And Naomi knew that. No matter how much she loved someone, she had to maintain her independence. This was what she had learned throughout her life. No one could give her strength except herself. Brad, the man Naomi had spent so many years loving and longing for, the man she had once thought would share the rest of her life, now stood before her. And he, too, found it hard to accept this decision. He looked at Naomi, his gaze no longer one of complacency, but deep empathy, a kind of understanding she could not overlook. He knew she loved him, and knew she was also facing the pain of standing by her choice. But what moved Naomi the most was the respect Brad had for her, his silence acknowledging that he did not want to be the one to force her to choose between love and career. "Naomi, I can't ask you to give up what you've built," Brad said, his voice soft, yet profound. "You have the right to choose your path. If you think this relationship will affect your work and career, I respect that decision. I understand this is not easy for you, but I will never force you." Brad's words were like a gentle light shining into Naomi's heart, making her feel that a part of her was understood and empathized with. She looked into Brad's eyes, seeing the patience and love he had for her. That love was not possessive, not the selfish kind she had feared. Instead, it was freedom. It was Brad's sacrifice, as he let her take control of her life, decide what she felt was right. Naomi felt that, and in that moment, she understood that the sacrifice she had thought could only come from one side, could truly come from Brad's respect and love. Naomi didn't cry. Despite her heart being in turmoil, despite feeling she was standing at a crossroads, she didn't cry. She knew that deep down, she had made the right choice. Sometimes, loving someone isn't about making them everything in your life, but about helping them understand that love can make us stronger, freer, and help us find ourselves amid life's challenges. Naomi knew that, whatever decision she made, the love between her and Brad would always be a beautiful part of her life. "Thank you," Naomi whispered, her voice choked but still strong. "Thank you for understanding me, for respecting my decision. I love you, but I also love myself and my career. This doesn't mean I'm giving you up. It just means I can't let love dictate everything. I hope you understand." Brad nodded, his gaze still warm, with no regret, only understanding. "I will always be here, Naomi. I will always support you. Whether it's in your work or personal life, you will always have a place in my heart." Although Brad's words didn't contain promises of a shared future, it was the understanding and respect that made Naomi feel lighter than ever. Their love was not something that could be measured by promises, but by sacrifice and mutual understanding. Naomi turned and walked out of the office, but she knew that no matter where she went, no matter what path she chose, her heart would always be with Brad. Their love wouldn't end. It would simply grow in a different way, a way they both needed to respect and fully understand. Love is not about possession, nor is it about ownership. Sometimes, love is understanding, sacrifice, and the freedom to choose one's path without giving up personal values and dreams. Naomi walked on, her heart lighter, knowing that no matter how things changed, the love between her and Brad would always be a beautiful part of her memories. And as she looked ahead, she knew she would continue on the path she had chosen, with steady steps and full of hope. A year had passed since Naomi and Brad parted ways, each continuing on their own path. Naomi still worked hard at the company, continuing to build the career she had carefully nurtured for many years. She no longer lived in vague longing, no longer reminiscing about what could never become a reality. There were times when she wondered if she could give up everything she had ever longed for to pursue a dream of love. But now, she realized that life wasn't just about the sweet moments with the person you love, but also about the long journey you have to continue alone, holding on to your own values. On the mornings when Naomi woke up, she realized that she had found peace in her own heart. Although her love for Brad remained intact, she understood that life didn't revolve around one person, one moment, but about herself, her growth, and the values she had always worked to maintain. She hadn't lost herself in love, and though her heart still held on to a bit of longing, she remained firm in her decisions. She knew that while love could come at unexpected times, what mattered most was how we remain true to ourselves and not lose sight of our dreams and desires in life. Brad, although still unable to forget Naomi, had also found his own path. He continued with his work, his relationships no longer haunted by unfulfilled feelings. But deep in his heart, he still remembered Naomi, still held on to the beautiful memories of the woman who had made his heart beat faster. He knew that sometimes the best things can't be obtained, but what mattered was always respecting and cherishing what we have, even if it's only for a brief moment. Naomi and Brad no longer met often. Their lives had gone in different directions, but the connection between them had never completely faded. In the occasional encounters, their eyes would still find each other discreetly, as if there was still something unfinished. Naomi felt that, although time had passed, love was something not easily erased. But she also knew that each person must learn to let go in order to move forward. She couldn't let that love dominate her life, but it remained an inseparable part of her memories, a part that made her stronger and more mature. Her love for Brad had taught Naomi many things about herself, about what she truly needed in life. She realized that, no matter how deeply she loved someone, she still had to be herself, still had to hold on to the values and goals she had set. Love, no matter how beautiful, couldn't replace the things one must do in life. And sometimes, love comes at the most unexpected times, in ways we never imagined, but that's what makes it even more special and precious. The story of Naomi and Brad ended like a chapter in their lives, a chapter full of emotions, ups and downs, but also full of learning and growth. Naomi knew that love would not be everything in life, but it would always be an important part, a part that helped her realize her own worth. She didn't need to change herself to please anyone, because only by living true to herself could she find true happiness. On a winter afternoon, when the light from the Christmas lights in the city reflected through the window, Naomi stood there, smiling at herself. She had gone through challenging days, had loved, had sacrificed, but now she understood that love wasn't something that could take over everything. It could come and go. But what mattered most was that we always hold on to our values and dreams in life. Naomi had found peace in her heart, not just because she had loved Brad, but because she had learned to love herself, and that was the most important thing.